r/NoSleep, posted by Reddit user Spike Goddess. I run a museum of cursed objects. The Cabinet of Horrors has been with my family for a long time. Recently, a few people asked about a black cabinet of horrors, and a couple asked if I was ever going to talk more about my mothers, May and Leah. Fortunately for us, I can talk about both these things at once. First though, a quick update of recent events. Courtney is still getting lost, although Em is starting to warm up to her. I caught Courtney fiddling with the door to the basement the other day, the one where I keep the objects too dangerous to display, or those not suitable to display for whatever reason. She claimed she was trying to familiarize herself with the layout. Honestly, I don't buy that for a second. The thing is though, that Courtney continues to prove herself reliable. She's stopped visitors from doing dangerous stuff countless times. It's hard not to trust her. So for now, I'm gonna keep a close eye on her. So, I know you're curious about the object. I would be too. But, I'm sorry. I'm not ready to talk about it. I don't know if I ever will be. It sits in the basement, locked up tightly where it won't hurt anyone ever again. Honestly, it's partially there so I won't have to see it often either. Instead, I'll talk about the Cabinet of Horrors. I was 12, and my mothers were alive and happy. Here's the thing about 12-year-old Alex. She didn't want to be in the business of cursed objects. No, she wanted to be a musician. This is particularly interesting since I was terrible at music. I was a member of our school's ukulele club, since that was a thing, and the taste of musical life I got from strumming 4 chords while our lead singer caterwauled the lyrics to some forgettable country song had me hooked. This also happened to be the rebellious phase of my life. I remember how angry I was the night before the cabinet came into our lives. Considering what happened eventually with the object, I wish I had let my anger go. God, I don't even remember what I was mad about. My mothers and I were sitting at the dining table. Normally, I was allowed to go up to my room and be a sulky preteen while I ate, but on Wednesday nights, we always did a family dinner. My mother said it was important to sit down at least once a week and talk to each other, really talk. As an adult, I appreciate the idea, although my mothers were always available if I wanted to talk too. As a 12-year-old, well, okay mom, I said nastily as possible, pushing around the mashed potatoes on my plate. I love mashed potatoes, but again, it was pretty much full-on angst hours. Oh, for clarification, May was called Mom when I was a kid, and Leah was Mama. Go ahead, interrogate me. They shared a look, and finally, Mom looked back at me, her eyes tired. Her eyes, they were the nicest blue. A soft baby blue as relaxing to stare at as a clear sky. At the time, of course, I imagined them to be the blue of the devil's eyes. I know it's hard having all the dangerous stuff around the house, Sweet Pea, Mom said. I still remember her voice, smooth and soft as the finest honey. But your mama and I, we want to know what's going on with you. Okay? What's going on with me is I'd like to be able to have friends over instead of having to make up excuses so they don't accidentally activate some insane curse. I snapped. What I'd like is a mother who's a mechanic, or a teacher, or a scientist. Can you do that? Hun, we're sorry our jobs make things hard for you, said Mama. Unlike my fair-complexioned mom, Mama had rich dark hair, olive skin, and eyes that spoke many years of difficulty and hardship with their nearly black shine. She too was beautiful. It wasn't easy for me when I was a child, and I resented my parents, but our family has always undertaken the duty of protecting others. Your mom and I are proud of what we do. We hope one day you'll see that. In an act I regret to this day, I slammed my fork and knife down and stomped up to my room. My mothers didn't come after me. I really think they understood that phase I was going through was not actually related to them, and although it saddened them, they knew screaming at me wasn't the answer. I slammed my door to the room and locked it. My mothers could kick it down easily, Mama especially, but I knew they wouldn't. I hopped onto my bed, pulled out my cell phone, and started furiously typing a text to my friend Megan, complaining about the unfairness of life. Mind you, we didn't have smartphones then. It was good old Motorola Razr, and it was all the rage those days. God, I feel a million years old now. Anyway, Megan texted back, assuring me that I was justified in my rage. She was the only friend I had who knew about what my family did. Feeling righteous and indignant, I went to sleep. Megan wasn't at school the next day. I was worried enough to send a text, but not enough to go check on her. She was probably just a little under the weather. That is, until I heard my mother's talking as I was returning home from school. "Shouldn't, May. I'm sorry, but I don't think it would be helpful." "She has a right to know," I heard my mom say, heatedly. "You think she'll feel better not knowing what happened?" Better than she'd know feeling the grisly details of how her best friend died? "Yes," snapped Mama. There was a heated pause. I crouched just outside the door, heart hammering so loud I was afraid they would hear it. "She might be..." Mom paused. "We should go check. Her grandma didn't say." "Babe, you know the chances," Mama said back, sounding forlorn. My heart clenched. "We'll go, but we have to do our research first. We don't know." That was all I needed to hear. My feet pounded dully on the hard pavement as I sprinted towards Megan's house. I had no doubt my mothers were talking about her. Not having the experience to know the danger of going in somewhere without proper knowledge, I was furious that my mothers were not rushing to save my friend, and determined to do it myself. Who knows what my mothers got her into, I thought. My hand skimmed the little silver pocket knife I kept in my hip. It had been a gift from my mother's when I was 8, because that's normal. But in this case, I was glad of it. When I arrived at Megan's house around 15 minutes later, thoroughly winded and clutching at the stitch in my side as I tried to quiet my breathing, it was eerily silent. No birds were chirping. No wind was blowing. It was the first time I'd experienced this in my life, and even then, even not knowing what it meant, it felt wrong, felt evil in my very bones. I shivered. I approached the front door cautiously. To my shock and dread, it was cracked ajar. As I pushed it open, it gave an ominous creak. The air inside Megan's house was dead and stifling. The instant I stepped past the doorway, an odor unlike any other hit my nostrils, foul and putrid, like food that's been left out far too long in the summer sun, but with a mustiness to it that spoke undeniably of flesh and blood and bone, rotting, just like the meat it really is. I clutched at my stomach and heaved, emptying its contents onto Megan's horrific beige rug. I wiped my mouth, disgusted, and determined to make it up to her later. "Megan?" I asked cautiously, quietly. I felt afraid of alerting something, although I couldn't imagine what. I stepped further into the house, finding it utterly abandoned. I glanced left, then right, finding the kitchen and living room abandoned. I headed for the stairs, since Megan's room was on the upper level. "Megan?" I heard a sudden thump above me, followed by a small cry. "Megan!" I screamed, throwing my caution in the wind and sprinting up the stairs. I stumbled, skinning my knee on an awful carpet. I gritted my teeth and kept going, ignoring the growing feeling of dread. "Megan!" I reached the top of the stairs and stumbled over something. Instantly, I threw up again, turning away sharply and coughing miserably as I retched. It was Megan's parents, both clearly dead. My eyes stung at the sight of their bloodied bodies, mangled as though by a tiny vicious wild animal. Deep, small lacerations littered their bodies, and their faces were chewed as if by a sharp-toothed rat, exposing fat and muscle, and the roots of their teeth. I gasped, heaving again, but there was nothing left in my stomach. I was distracted from my shock and horror by a little scuttling sound, like tiny clawed feet on a hardwood floor. Cautiously, I crept toward the only hardwood room upstairs, Megan's bedroom. It was hardwood because she used to wet the bed when she was little, and her parents thought it would be better not to have carpeting since wood is easier to clean up. They'd given her the non-carpeted bedroom when they'd moved there. She'd always seemed embarrassed about it. I'd always tried to convince her not to be. Her door, too, was ajar. I pushed it open, wincing as it creaked. Still on my hands and knees, I felt bile rise in my throat again, already sore from acid, when I realized the blood of Megan's parents still stained my fingers. Inside Megan's room, I was immediately met by blood on the floor and by Megan's body. She was covered in cuts like her parents. She groaned feebly, twitching. Alive. "Megan," I hissed, going to her and glancing around for any signs of danger. When none were readily apparent, just dragging marks on the floor near my friend, I shook her shoulder. "Megan, are you okay?" She groaned, clenching her eyes shut. Then she said something. "What was that, Megan?" "Alex." I shook her again, starting to sob. "Megan, please, what are you saying? Are you all right?" "Alex. Run." Just then, a horrific snarling sounded from behind me. It sounded like a dog, or a rat, or I don't know. It wasn't right. It wasn't right. I whipped around, but nothing was there. My eyes searched frantically, darting so fast I made myself dizzy, but all I could see was an empty room and a plain cabinet with one door slightly ajar. I studied the black cabinet, not removing my hand from Megan's shoulder and using the other to draw my knife. It seemed non-threatening enough, but looking at it, a chill went down my spine. The doors were dark and smooth and had ornate gold designs adorning their edges, while the rest of the cabinet was quite plain. The cabinet rattled, and Megan made a small, piteous sound. "Don't worry, Megan," I told her, far more bravely than I felt. I'll protect you." I crept cautiously towards the cabinet. I think I intended to shut it, but I can't explain it really. Or I can now, but I couldn't then. The second my hand made contact with the glossy golden handle, my mind went blank, and my body moved, seemingly of its own accord. I opened the cabinet. The foul stench that filled the house assaulted me so strongly that I choked, my eyes stinging as they filled with tears. I stumbled back, hands reaching up to protect my face from them, from what was emerging, beady eyes glinting maliciously from the cabinet. They were imps. At least, that's what they looked like to me then. With flat marble gray skin and devilish features, they were about the size of chihuahuas each, and far more malevolent. And I've seen some truly malevolent chihuahuas in my day. And they weren't even cursed. The imps had tiny black horns that protruded from their heads and backs, long spiny tails, and two tiny wings that stuck out uselessly from their backs. Grotesque and radiating that foul stench, 4 of them crawled from the cabinet on all 4 legs, emitting rapid, throaty clicking sounds, their eyes fixed on Megan almost immediately. "Get away," I snapped, brandishing my knife. My legs turned to jelly, and I sank to the floor, scooting backwards desperately so that Megan was behind me. Get back!" The leader of them, slightly larger, with longer, more twisted facial horns, locked eyes with me. It leered, and something inside of me turned venomous and stabbing. I cried out in pain and doubled over, and that's when they attacked. Tiny claws ripped at my skin, my hair. I shrieked as they pierced my flesh, each one like a white-hot razor blade as they tore effortlessly through my skin. Whatever these creatures were, they were designed to hunt. I swatted at them, and when my hands connected, they felt hot too, and I recoiled, crying out again as my hand stung from the contact. Megan screamed from behind me. It was a horrid sound, mangled and desperate and gargling. Instinctively, I knew it was the sound an animal makes when it's dying. I screamed to match her and turned blindly, lunging with my knife to try to get them off of her. My knife met something solid, and one of the imp creatures crackled wetly. I forced my eyes open, wiped away the curtain of blood seeping from the cuts on my forehead that blocked my vision, and saw that I'd managed to hit one of them. Megan, on the other hand, had gone silent. When I looked at her, I knew at once she was dead. She had that stillness about her, that utter absolute stillness. You know, the human brain might not consciously pick up the motion of other people's breathing, the rise and fall of their chest, the blinking of their eyes, the wetting of their lips and their tongues. But when I tell you that as soon as it's gone, you notice, I hope you don't have to experience it. But yeah, you notice, and she was dead. I didn't have time to sob before the things caught my attention with that awful clicking sound. The four of them surrounding me, one with an abdominal wound that seeped thick, oozing black liquid. The clicking got faster and faster, and a high-pitched note rang out louder and louder, until it was a vibrating warble that completely immobilized me. The imps approached me, and involuntarily, I dropped the knife. It clattered on the hardwood floor that Megan hated. Immediately, the imp creatures seized my weakness and lunged. I lacked the energy even to scream as they descended upon me, claws tearing and ripping and parting my flesh as easily as scissors part paper. Dizzy, I closed my eyes. Even the pain was becoming less. A blessing, I thought barely. Alexis, get up! I opened my eyes again, sleepy and confused. Was Mama determined to wake me up? Could she never let me rest? Then I took in the scene before me and shot upright so fast my head spun again, remembering what was actually happening. Mom was fighting, magnificent, twin daggers shining in her hand as she slashed the imps. She was bleeding from her legs and torso, and even from a tiny cut above her right eye, but she fought as though she couldn't even feel it. As vicious as the creatures were, my mom was twice as vicious. Mama was checking me over, hands calloused and rough, but achingly familiar as she brushed over my wounds, seeking to soothe the hurt, stop the bleeding. "You're going to be fine, Alexis. Just fine," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure the imps were still occupied. She was still touching me, and God, I'd missed it. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it. I know I was crying unashamedly as I buried my face into her lap. Mom shouted in pain, and Mama had gone to help fight. I managed to open up my tired eyes again, and was horrified to find my mother's being driven back towards the cabinet by the creatures. They didn't seem to realize it was happening, with all the wounds the creatures were inflicting, but the imps definitely had a triumphant gleam in their beady little eyes. My eyes widened in a moment of realization. "Mom! Mama! Move!" They did without questioning me, and I dove at the things, scattering them like a bowling ball scatters pins. I sprinted towards the cabinet, almost slipping on the blood on the floor. I didn't know if it was Megan's or my mother's or my own. I grabbed the cabinet doors, swung them wide open. For a moment, the urge to enter the cabinet consumed me, and I stared into it. Then, Mom shouted my name, and I screamed in triumph as I slammed the doors closed with a final click. The imps gave me a terrible shriek and clamored to get into the cabinet, grasping at the golden handles with their little rat hands. They were so preoccupied with their task, that they didn't notice my mother slicing them down with ease. Finally, with the creatures dead, but with my best friend dead too, my mother's and I stood there, panting, staring at the cabinet. Things were suddenly hazy, and I think I passed out then, because the next thing I remember, I was in my bed at home, with Mom and Mama both holding my hands. They both cried when they saw I was awake. So different, but the same whenever I was in trouble. They had been since I was just tiny, and I guess I'd forgotten until this incident. I cried too, and hugged them tighter than I'd ever hugged them. I learned later that the cabinet had been sold to Megan's family by an antique dealer the previous day. They'd opened it immediately and had been trying to escape when they were killed. The previous night, when Megan had returned from school, she'd gone to investigate and had been attacked too. She'd lain there for almost an entire day until I found her. This made me sick to my stomach, like very few things in my life. Megan had been alive. She had been alive for almost 24 hours until I stumbled in and agitated the creatures. I remember my mother's disgusting needing to research. To this day, I think that if I had waited, trusted my mother's, been less impulsive, my best friend would still be alive. I had a good talk with my mother's after that. "Alex, we want you to know that you don't have to continue the family business," Mom told me gently. "Your mama was born into this life, while I married into it. To be honest, I'm not sure what I want for you, my precious daughter. The light of my life, my gem, my Alex." She kissed the top of my head, causing the bandages to slip slightly askew. "We'll support you with whatever you want to do, your mama and I. We're so sorry about your friend, and we promise we'll make sure it doesn't happen again, if we can. Come to us next time, okay, baby?" I sobbed like an actual baby. The next day I decided I never, ever wanted to be that powerless in the face of a curse again. Never wanted to see someone I loved die because I wasn't strong enough again. So, then, here I am, I suppose. The Cabinet of Horrors is stored in a well-traveled corner of the museum, with a plaque warning visitors not to touch it, and telling them a little bit about its history. Even M isn't sure when it was made, just that some serious bad blood was spilled, literally, over it a couple centuries ago. It absorbed that power, and now is essentially a doorway to a different dimension. It never reveals the same reality. I've never seen the imps again, but I have gotten to witness a number of other things, both great and terrible, when it's been opened by mistake. Needless to say, the golden door handles are now chained shut with the most heavy-duty chain I could find. We haven't had a problem since that, but I'm still keeping a close eye on that. So, there you have it. I miss my mothers, but I'm really glad I told you all about them today, because they were good women and deserve to be remembered. Maybe one day I'll tell you about the object. Maybe, if I'm braver. For now, stay safe, and remember, don't open the Cabinet of Horrors, please.